My name is Saus Reese. Even though I've been here for 4 or 5 years, I do have to clarify this because I do not know a good chunk of you. But I would like to meet you. So, for this Children's Day thing, I was asked by Roger, not voluntold, which is somewhat unusual, um, to come up and spend some time talking about God and how He is walking me through my life. I wasn't too hot originally on this subject, but as I sat there and contemplated and reflected upon my life, it definitely began to grow on me. So I've been a Christian for a while, um, probably ever since I was really little. Um, Even though at that point you can't fully comprehend that kind of like decision, but you still have that perfect, innocent, unwavering belief that you are right. It's a heavy decision, but it's a good one to make. When I got a bit older, I started to see how important and beneficial having a ever watchful God was, being able to lean on Him through tough decisions and situations. For example, my mom's cancer, and as I was there and just trying to cope with that, having God there as a crutch has been very helpful as when that happened and also in recent times. It's been 10 years, and I've held faith for all of them. And still, my mom is around and kicking just because of the grace of God and just all the wonderful things that He can do. Another reason is keeping track of me and my helpful nature. Sometimes I can just take on other people's burdens and stuff like that, and that's never good for one person to do. So I have to keep that in track. But having God there, always watching over and being able to put those on Him has been helpful and beneficial. Let's see. Probably the place where I started getting most growth in my life as a Christian was probably coming here to the youth group. There has been so many times where I've just had so many great experiences here and met so many wonderful people that have always been there for me, and I will probably cherish forever. You can't really get rid of friends that are like that. For a while, I was looking for some sort of, I guess, purpose in life. And that's also what I found coming here to this youth group. I think it was about not a year ago, but it was last year over at the fall retreat. And I was sitting there and I was praying because I knew to myself that I was lacking purpose and I was having a really hard time with that. So I cried out to God, I will listen if you please, please, please show me a purpose. And as I was sitting there, right away, I just heard a resounding go. And I can't quite exactly explain that, but instantly my mind clicked into you need to do mission work. That's what He's telling you to do. Which after that happened, I was just so ecstatic because I love serving. And if that's what God wants me to do, then that's even better. But so one of the times that I was able to kind of like experience what that would be like is last year I went on the main missions trip, and that was just amazing. Amazing enough that I'm going back again this year. And I'm excited to just see the people, hopefully, that I left last year and also be able to make new friends and meet new people. Let's see. That mission trip was so helpful to me. I loved every minute of it, from helping in the camp to sleeping on the hard floor at night. Even getting my hair braided into an unbelievable mess. It was absolutely some of the best experiences I've ever had. Going with what God told me to do, this year I wanted to do a whole lot of research on missions and such. And conveniently enough, I had a research paper that was due for the end of the year, a final. So I decided to write mine on mission aviation and also the future in missions, which that couple of months I sifted through so many note cards that had different facts on them. I think at the end of it, I had like 200 to 300 different note cards with a fact on each one. I never wanted to look at a note card ever again. But it was probably one of the best decisions that I've made. I learned so much through that experience, and I'm still learning, and it's probably brought me closer and made me so excited for the future. But so I'm almost done because I can't be up here for very long. But before I go, I wanted to share with you guys one of my favorite Psalms that really resonates with me. And here we go. It is Psalm 23. The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not be in want. He makes me lie down in green pastures. He leads me beside quiet waters. He restores my soul. He guides me in paths of righteousness. Even though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for you are with me. Your rod and your staff, they comfort me. You prepare a table before me in the presence of my enemies. You anoint my head with oil, my cup overflows. Surely goodness and love will follow me all the days of my life, and I will dwell in the house of the Lord forever. So that is definitely one of my favorite verses, well, not verses, Psalms or chapters, I guess, in the Bible. It just, every single time I read it, it just reminds me that I shouldn't have to stress over like little tiny things or even the large things because I always have God there for me. So I could probably continue for hours, but trust me, no one wants that. And besides, that's for Jeff to do. So thanks for listening. I'm happy I got the opportunity to do this.
Thank you, Silas. I just want to say thanks to all the kids who have participated today and all the workers downstairs that make this happen from week to week. Thank you so much. I was asked by my lovely wife to share things that God has taught me through my children. And there are many things that God has taught me through my children. And when Hannah was probably about 2 years old, I started taking notes because she did things that I thought I probably should keep track of because I'll forget, and they were really funny at the time. For instance, one morning, a 3-year-old Hannah woke up. She looked at me and she said, "All this time my bones were sleeping, but I stretched them, and now they're awake." Also, a 3-year-old Hannah taught me that the song Sister Christian and the song Our God make a wonderful medley. And they do it in the same key. When Jordan was 3, one night I told her it was time for her tablet to go up. It was bedtime. And I saw her begin to tear up. And I explained to her that she needed to show an appropriate response if she wanted to continue using her tablet in the future. And so she took a minute and she wiped her eyes. And then she pointed to the Tupperware container on the counter and sadly said, I just need a cookie to make me feel better. Also from 3-year-old Jordan, after picking out clothes to her to wear one morning because my wife works early shift, and so I got her dressed for preschool. I sat her down to do her hair in front of the bathroom mirror, and she looked in the mirror, and then she looked back at me, and she said, "Dad, this just doesn't match." One day in the car ride home, out of the blue, Jordan exclaimed, "Caterpillars. They turn into butterflies when they get their new costumes, you see." And one fall day when Hannah was 6, I was explaining daylight savings time, how we gain an hour in the fall and how we actually wake up an hour later. So it'll be lighter outside in the morning, and it basically gets darker earlier and so on and so forth. And I probably had a lot more to say than that. And, you get to that point where your kid's eyes just kind of glaze over and you need to wrap it up, right? So I said, that's basically how it works. I guess it can kind of be confusing. And she looks at me with a straight face and says, Dad, it's just math. And math is supposed to be confusing. So by this point in my life, I'd learned that bones can be awakened by stretching, caterpillars get new costumes, a 4-year-old can match outfits better than a 40-year-old, math is confusing, and cookies make you feel better. I also learned that our children are always watching and learning from us. Proverbs 22:6 says this: train up a child in the way he should go, and when he is old, he will not depart from it. Ephesians 6:4 says, fathers, do not provoke your children to anger, but bring them up in discipline and instruction of the Lord. And we found in our house by reciting scripture, and especially, I think, by praying together every night, it really makes a difference, in how our children act and behave and respond, and how we respond to them, and just what they know in the Lord. I've realized that our children are watching us and they're imitating us. When Hannah was probably 2 or 3, she coined the term jazzbot. And she coined it to fill a need. And that need was giving her father a way to vent at bad drivers without saying what he was actually thinking. So one day on the way home from preschool, Jordan and I were talking, and I was talking to her about God created her uniquely, and there was no other person exactly like her. And about that time, a driver comes up behind us, and we're in single lane construction, and he tries to pass us. And I called him a jazzbot. And after it was over and we were away from that mess, Joe spoke up and she said, Dad, don't call him a jazzbot. He's a person that God created uniquely, and there is no other person exactly like him. I've also learned that children don't have barriers like adults do. They make acquaintances way faster than us adults. We can go to a swimming pool on vacation, and about 20 seconds is all it takes for them to have new best friends. Meanwhile, the adults are trying to decide if we want to give an awkward hello to one another. I've also learned from my children that I'm not perfect as a parent. And sometimes the best thing I can do is just tell them I was wrong and ask for their forgiveness. And I've also learned from my children that I'm lucky to have my wife as their mom, because I'm way not smart enough to do this on my own. And I've learned that I'm still learning. You know, I was one of 3 boys, and my brothers were a little bit older than me, and when they had kids, they had all boys. Until my oldest brother had his last child, who's a girl. There had been almost 60 years on my side of the family without a girl born, all boys. So I grew up with brothers. I grew up with nephews. I knew how to change a boy's diaper. And God said, I will give you girls. And you know what? I wouldn't trade it for the world. But I can't help but think that he had in mind some teaching experiences for me in giving me girls that I might not have gotten if we'd had boys. Would have loved them either way. But this is what I've learned through my kids.
Steve wouldn't tell me what he was going to say today, so I think he didn't want me to steal it. But I just want to say first, watching the kids up here leading worship, sharing what they're learning in their faith walk is so inspiring. I remember a lot of these kids from when they were super little, and now like Keegan Russell's grown up and getting married, and I don't know, it's such a blessing to see all these kids growing up and following the Lord. From my own kids, I've learned so much. Motherhood is a joy and an honor. Um, but I think one thing for me is I've always struggled with fear and anxiety, probably since I was a little girl. Um, becoming a mom just amplified that. From the minute I was pregnant, I was afraid I was going to lose the baby. And then when Hannah was born early, I was afraid of everything because she was so little and she needed medicine and oxygen and she wouldn't breathe right and she wouldn't eat right. And I was so worried about what that would mean for her. Clearly, God was faithful and she is beautiful and doing great. Um, and learned a lot about just trusting the Lord and spending time in prayer. And um, really, that's the only peace, the only comfort. Um, Same thing with Jordan. She wanted to come early too. And we were able to keep her in long enough. You all prayed so well for us. But at 9 months, when we found out she had to have surgery, I think a lot of this really came home to me was this idea of how I let my fear and anxiety make me hold on a little too tight sometimes. And so I called my sister because, my sister has always been able to make things better for me. She used to sing "He's Got the Whole World in His Hands" to sing me to sleep at night when I was afraid. And so I called her and I said, I, nobody can make me feel better. The doctors, they say she's going to be fine, but I'm so afraid. And I'm going to try to hold it together. She said, I said, I just need you to tell me that everything's going to be okay. And she said something really profound that keeps coming back to me. She said, Bonnie, I wish I could tell you everything's going to be okay, but I don't know that. Um, what I do know is that Jordan and Hannah don't belong to you, and they never have. Um, they belong to God. And, here we came up in front of the church and committed them to Him, but, there's a part of my heart that's always wanted to hold on a little too tight. Um, she said, they belong to God, and He has their best in mind. In fact, He loves them more than you do. So, what better place for them to be than in His hands? So, throughout my faith journey, it seems like fear and anxiety is something that comes up frequently. Well, my friends can attest to that. um, but God remains in control, and He's faithful and He's kind, and He has shown that to us over and over and over again. Every time I try to hold on too tight, there's this thing in my head that says, "Guess what, Bonnie? Your kids don't belong to you; they belong to me, and I love them, and I have their best in mind." Um, and Philippians 4:6 says, "Do not be anxious about anything, but in every situation, by prayer and petition, with thanksgiving, present your request to God." I can tell you that He is faithful.
Now we're going to ask Steve and Sharon to come up. And they've had a lot of experience with kids over the years. Let us know what God has taught them through the children in their lives.
Hi, Steve is just really here to hold my hand. He said he wasn't going to talk, so he's used his 5 words for the day. He doesn't say. I just wanted to talk about what I got to thinking about how important the people in my life have been that made me feel loved. And I think it started. My mother died when I was not quite 3. My sister was not quite 5. So that side of the family of my mother's were the most loving people in the world. And they, to this day, have been what I think made me know what life was all about. They're still important in my life. We just had a reunion this last weekend with that whole side of the family. And I thought, everybody there has been blessed by this family. It was a family of total love. And I said to somebody, I said, your parents raised good kids, and you kids have raised good children. I don't think we moved one time to pick anything up that some younger child wasn't there, teenager or somebody, can I get that for you? What do you need? I mean, I think we have example through our families. We have examples in our church from people about maybe more Christian things, but Christian things have to go into the world too, and the world has to come into the Christian part if you're going to be whole. And I was thinking about the kids that have been in our lives. I think we had our first foster kids when, I don't know how old we were, but she was, the first one we had was like 6, same age as our daughter. Then we got a little boy who was 4, the same age as our son. So I had 4 kids. We had 4 kids at home, and Steve worked at Hallmark, and they put him on second shift. That meant 4 kids from 4 to midnight or whatever. Yeah, it wasn't a fun time, but but I just look at the kids, and then there's just been kids through our lives. I don't know. This is probably the longest we've ever been without someone living with us at some point. But I thank God for everyone He's put in our lives and everybody who calls us grandma. And I just think that one thing that is so important to kids is just a routine. I look at Cadence, and Cadence goes to 3 different families during the week. Hi. And she has her own routine at each one, and she doesn't tell me, that's not how Nana does it. That's not how Meemaw does it. I mean, she has her own routine at each place. And when they know they are loved, it doesn't really matter what you're doing with them. And she knows she's loved. And that's just what we have worked on through our whole lives. We're going this afternoon to a family who the mom is here from Florida to see her children, and they moved here from Panama when the kids were all just little and became part of our lives, and we've raised those kids. I mean, I have one granddaughter back here in the back, but I just think each one of them are special. And they get more special the older you get. Maybe you have more time to think about them. But I've been doing pictures, and as I look back at those pictures, and I think I wouldn't have given up anything for the experiences that we had with those children and how important they are to us. If there are kids around you, just ask God what your purpose in their life is.
I'm not sure what that meant. Oh, right. Okay. So our plan was, are you printing those? Okay. So what we wanted to do was have some time where we could gather as families or extended families, or just join a family and pray over our kids. So we had some prayer guides that got lost, and so we're printing them right now. But if you would just kind of gather in groups and join people you don't know even, and take some time to pray for God to work in our lives and in our kids' lives. Okay, ready? Oh, I'm going to pray, and then we'll start.